Today's episode is sponsored by Nerva, a non-invasive, evidence-based, at-home IBS management tool. Nerva is an app that provides gut-directed hypnotherapy through a structured 6-week program followed by a maintenance plan. Use the link in show notes to try Nerva today for 30% off. Welcome back to the Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin Judge, and today's episode is one that I'm really excited about and I hope that you get to connect with because we have one of my favorite guests and dear Instagram friends, Christine Olivo. She is someone that I connected with early on in my own Instagram IBS community creation. And we've been able to kind of share communities and talk through some of the complexities of sharing things about IBS online. Today's episode is really unique because we're talking about how to support someone with IBS and how to not actually support someone with IBS. And this is one that I really want to hear your thoughts on. So as you listen to the episode, whether you laugh, you cry, maybe you get frustrated, maybe you agree or you don't agree, I want you to come into the Gut community on Facebook and share those thoughts with us. And then if you want to reach out to Christine, our show notes have all the ways that you can do that. So enjoy our conversation, enjoy the episode, and I look forward to connecting with you after. Christine, thank you for being back on the show. And I always love getting to chat with you because, you know, we're on the same side of the team with like having IBS, but also having like different insights into it. And it's just always fun to get to chat and talk. So would love for you to introduce yourself, give an update of where you're at, what's going on, and whatever you want to share from even our last conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so honored and I'm so excited to be here. I'm Christine. Maybe some of you watching this know me, maybe you don't. I have an Instagram account called My IBS Life. I have had irritable bowel syndrome since I was diagnosed officially in the spring of 2007. So it's been quite a while of dealing with this. Been through a lot. And I've tried to channel all of that chaotic energy and pain and sadness and anxiety and everything that comes with this into humor. I even said this in the last season. That's kind of just how I've always dealt with things in my life, is just trying to make it sarcastic and just trying to laugh at it instead of just like constantly crying about it. So yeah, over there I just make memes about like pretty much all the things we go through as IBS patients. I try to make like funny reels, and even on my stories, I kind of just talk about my day to day. Every day is different. Some days I feel great. I'm really energetic. I'm really happy. And other days I'm really low. I'm really upset. I have cried on Instagram. It's so embarrassing, but like, I just try to keep it as real as I can. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do in this corner of the internet.
That's awesome. And it's so important. I think something that I hear, and I don't do things through humor. And that's what I meant. Like we have different perspectives, which I like. And it's important, I think, because we are all like, as human beings, we're different and we experience life differently. And I am never a sarcastic person. I'm very, kind of cut and dry, which is why I'm in the health world. And for me, it's like, I can't make a joke sometimes about things. I'm like, so, scientific, but something that we hear in our programs, so we're working with women, and the more people I meet with IBS, the more that seeing different perspectives means so much to people who are living with it. Because whenever you get on Instagram and you see someone crying about their day, like, and you were just crying about your day, it makes you feel like, you're not alone in what you're going through. And when you see someone happy about their day, or you see someone, it's like you see these different perspectives and things. You see someone showing up and showing, hey, this is what it actually looks like. And not just like I have IBS, but also this is how it impacts my life. That people see that and they really connect, which is really important. And that kind of feeds into this idea of support. And that's what I want us to talk about is how to really support, how not to support. I think that's something that, those with IBS struggle to know how to ask for support. They struggle to know what they need until they get what they don't need. And it feels like a slap in the face, which we're going to talk about of what that looks like. Yeah. And then people who maybe are seeing that, oh, my friend has IBS, or my significant other has IBS, or, this person in my life, my family member has IBS, and they don't know how to support either. And it's such a fine line between truly supporting and not. And so I want to talk about that, of what maybe support has looked like for you in your journey, and maybe how it's changed over time, especially as you've built more of a community online.
Definitely. It's funny because when you told me the topic, I feel like this is a topic that I can get, like, I'm not going to cry, I promise, but I do get emotional about this topic because I've been so lucky these past 2.5 years to have my IBS life and to have found this community of people that do understand me and have made me feel confident in my condition now. And like, but it has certainly not been that way. And it's actually hard for me to kind of remember how I used to feel. But for, like over 10 years, I did feel like really lonely in what I was going through. And it really felt like I was the only one in my like close circle of people that was like going through this. And even my best friend in the entire world, her name is Sam, she has had IBS almost as long as I have, but our IBS is very different in how we feel it and our symptoms. I get very like, my IBS has a lot to do with my mental health too. It makes me very anxious. I'm a very anxious person because of it. She is so not that way. She couldn't care at all if she feels sick. Like if she has to go to the bathroom somewhere, she just goes. Like, I'm so not like that. I'm like, I got to get home, and then I have like a panic attack. And so even though I had her and we could connect kind of on a like same level, like we were also very different, and that would make me feel very lonely as well. I feel like a lot of questions I get asked on my IBS life is just like how you even go about telling your friends or your significant other or even like coworkers and stuff about this. And that has definitely just been part of my journey too, is learning how to have those conversations to better support yourself and have other people around you be able to better support you as well. So yeah, definitely in the beginning, it was hard. I feel like I lost a lot of friends, and now I feel like I just know how to have those conversations so that my friends don't feel like I don't want to hang out with them or I'm like alienating myself, but like we can all kind of just like understand each other more, and they can help me and I can help them and all that great stuff. So it definitely has been a journey, but yeah, it got easier with time and just learning more about myself and my body and how to communicate better about it.
Yeah, my dog is cheering that on. It's like, yes, absolutely. That's so important. And I like that you brought that up, of like learning how to communicate it. And, I think a lot of isolation comes from not sharing, right? There's some isolation that comes from sharing and being pushed down, which we'll talk about, in those experiences, which a lot of people get their first experiences with their doctor, right? Or a health professional, which it can be really hard. And then it's hard to bring things up if you've been just completely knocked down from it. But also, when we don't share what we're going through, it is easy to feel like no one else understands. Like there's absolutely no one. Or when you share with maybe one friend and they don't understand, there's that belief that, well, no one else gets it. Like there's no way. And so what are some things that you learned with sharing and talking about it that really worked? Or like maybe even some things that didn't work in different situations? Like if you have any tips or things that you tried that either just kind of face planted and then the things that you tried that did end up being successful.
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing I've learned is like, I always felt like, I never wanted, like we were kind of just saying, like, it was hard for me to open up to people about it because I was like, oh, they're not going to understand, or it's gross, it's embarrassing, it's this and that. But people are a lot more empathetic than you would think. And yes, you will run into some bad apples that don't understand, don't want to understand. They want you to toughen up, whatever. Those are the people you just try to have the least amount of communication with. You leave to the side of your life. But everyone else, honestly, and especially these days, so many people do have some sort of digestive problem. Like people are much more understanding than you might think. So the other thing is like, yeah, going along with like the embarrassing thing, I always just tell people like, when you bring up these conversations and you start communicating with people on like what's going on with you, like you can share as much as you want. You don't have to get into the nitty gritty sometimes I think I'm probably one of those people that does, but that's just my personality at this point. Is like, yeah, like I have explosive diarrhea. Sorry, I like can't come today.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be that way. You can literally just sit down and have a conversation with your friends or your significant other and be like, listen, I'm sorry I haven't been hanging out as much. I'm sorry I've been turning, invitations down. It's not that I don't want to hang out. It's just I've been having a really tough time with my stomach. I've been having a lot of health issues. If you want to learn more about it, I'm more than welcome to tell you about it. But that's just like what's going on. And I feel like that's been the best thing, is just showing the people that you care and you're not just blowing them off, and like really ingraining in them, like, I want to be your friend. I still want to be invited to things. I promise I'm not blowing you off. I'm just really sick. And I just need time to like get myself together. And hopefully the next time you ask, I'll be good to go. So I always say that, just like really drill it in them that you care. And that goes with like work too. I get that a lot. Like, how do I bring it up to my manager or my boss that I can't come in? I again just say, like, have that conversation. And again, you don't have to overshare, but just like tell your boss, like, I promise I'm not just like skipping out on work. I promise it's not that I don't want to work. I'm just like really sick right now. And just like constantly be in that communication of just showing how much you still care. And people will definitely like cling on to that more.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think there's always that fear that, oh, well, if I share, I'll get fired. Or if I share, I'll be judged. Or if I share, like, my friends will just completely cut me out. And you're right that it's a great way to see one who's on your side. But when you share with that kindness, it does open up the door to say, like, hey, I'm trying to meet you halfway here too, of like, this is something that I'm working through. And like, this is something that does impact my ability to show up as much as, I can. But I also am sharing that I want to do this with you. And like, I want to have a relationship, or I want to have this job. I want to do a good job, which might open up the conversation too of like, how can we make that work? And I think in work settings, especially these days where, we've gone online, we've worked from home, like there's a lot of flexibility that we've been able to create, and not everyone will have that flexibility, but you never know like what your boss may be able to do for you, like to help you, work in a way that you're comfortable with, to make sure that you can show up to your job, but also take care of yourself and not be in constant anxiety at work because you're at the office and that's not a comfortable place for you at that time in your life. Or, your friends might be able to say, hey, like, well, what could we do? Like, is there something that would be more doable for you? Like coming to your house, or, going to a specific type of restaurant, or whatever it may be, being able to share that and not just say, sorry, I just can't be your friend because I have gut issues. It's like, no, I want to be your friend. This is also just something that like I have to deal with. And so like, how can we make that work more? You never know what those conversations could open up to.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they don't always work out, which is also hard. And, one thing that I mentioned before is the doctor thing. I love good doctors. I'm a champion of good doctors. I'm a health professional. And so I get the back side of it, right? I know how much time people have. I know how stressed health professionals are. I get it. We don't have enough, especially gastroenterologists in the world. But also, a lot of people's first experience with talking about their gut is with either their family or their doctor. And when you bring something up to your doctor and say, I am having diarrhea every day, or I am crying on the floor. This is my story. I'm crying on the floor because I can't go to the bathroom, or like, it's like, it won't come out, or, it's like you're in so much pain and it feels embarrassing. And you finally get up the courage to say something, and to be kind of turned down, that can be such a big blow. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, because I know that's something you've experienced too. And you've come out of that, and that gets into, how we don't support people and the best way not to support those with IBS. But yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about those experiences and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I even talked about it on the last season, but yeah, I have definitely been open about I feel like I've been way more open about my bad experiences with doctors. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I poo-poo on them too much. There are great doctors out there, and very thankful for them. But yeah, I've had a lot of bad experiences with them where, especially in the beginning when I was getting diagnosed, a lot of doctors invalidating me or just saying, the classics is all in your head, or like, someone said I was just anorexic. Like, it was really like horrible. And I definitely hear that a lot in our community too, just from other people DMing me. And all I can say is you deserve better than that. And just know that you deserve better than that. If you are feeling like your healthcare professional is just blowing you off, they're not hearing you out, you don't have to be like confrontational with them. I don't think you should be, but one thing I even learned from Erin, you had a whole podcast last season of how to like deal with that. And I thought it was really good. Like, first, you just simply tell them like, hey, I just feel like you're not really listening to me. I want to go over some of the things I said. If they're still like not getting there, you can move on to the next doctor. And as you should always just keep advocating for yourself, because you deserve to get the proper support from your healthcare team. You deserve to get the proper diagnosis, the proper treatment. And especially when I first started in my IBS journey, I was really young. So I didn't have that voice yet to do that for myself. But that's why, if you are someone that's young and going through this, or if you're just someone that's just starting to go through this, it's all new, like, have someone with you, like whether it's a parent or your significant other, someone you trust that will speak up for you too. That has been really like good for me in my journey, and that's gotten me farther. And yeah, just always know that you deserve the best, and don't, take that from a doctor if you feel like you're not being treated well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we forget sometimes that we have that power to, like, you have the right to change healthcare providers, and not everyone has the ability. I mean, there is privilege in having options and not everyone has options. If you live, in a small town, or, right. Maybe you have to drive a long way to even see a gastroenterologist, or maybe your insurance only covers one. And, all of that is stuff we've talked about in a lot of these episodes. And it's just a frustrating piece that hopefully changes. And I know that it feels like it's changing, but I don't know when we'll all get there. But being able to say, they kind of work for you, like they're there to serve you. And yes, they only have 15 minutes. There are some strategies that we talk about often of, what to do at those appointments, how to prepare for those appointments. Like, happy to share those with anyone if you want to message me. But if someone is tearing you down, especially a healthcare provider and a parent as well, if someone is tearing you down, especially early on, you're right. You deserve way better than that. And that doesn't mean that what you're experiencing every day is a joke or and not real or invalid just because one person thinks so. Like, no one is living in your body like you are. It might not be exactly what you think. And I think that's okay to say that, like, it might not be what you think it is. But if someone's invalidating your experience and not willing to like help you kind of put those pieces together, like, that's what the health professional should be doing. If all they're saying is like, no, you're wrong, then that's not actually good care. So, and it's very hard to do. So you may not do it well. You may go to your car and cry and then call them later or send an email. It's like, it may not look exactly like, sticking up for yourself in the middle of that appointment. I even can't do that sometimes because, my emotions are, you feel embarrassed and you almost freeze, but, you do have that right to do that at whatever point that you need to. And so we know that, tearing someone down or invalidating them or telling them that they're wrong is not a way to support. But I want to talk about some other ways. So thinking about like your story and, experiences that you've had, or even what you've seen from your community, what are some things you've seen where people maybe have tried to be supportive or maybe even blatantly not, but it just is not, it does not line up?
Sure. That's a good question. I feel like the one thing that comes to mind, I feel like dating has always just been like really hard, and having like a romantic relationship, like it always gets awkward there. Like, there's a lot of awkward in that situation. And the one that comes to mind that I know I've talked about a lot, even on my own stuff, My fiance, Jay, he is an angel for the most part. And he tries to make me feel as comfortable as possible, especially at like his side of the family events. This isn't so much an issue anymore because I've been around long enough, but especially in the beginning, no one on his side of the family like really understood like why I wouldn't eat at certain family events. Like they would make dinner and I'd like sit there with an empty dinner plate. So he would try to support me by, you know, like trying to tell everyone like why I wasn't eating like in front of me though, and like be like, oh, she just has stomach issues, and he would just make it worse. Like it was just like bringing a bigger spotlight onto me, and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like within my romantic relationship, there's like some things like that. Within our community online, I'm hoping this doesn't come off the wrong way, but I've had some instances where there's almost like a competition of like who is more sick. And there's been a few times, it doesn't happen a lot, but there's been a few times I've gotten some like DMs that have come from someone and they'd be like, hey, I came across your page, like, thank you for what you do. I have IBD, so like I understand what you're going through, even though mine's like so much worse. And like it's just like I've seen that a few times, and that always misses the mark, in my opinion. I don't know if you've experienced any of that, Erin, but to me, this stuff should never be like a competition of who's more sick. That doesn't seem like a fun prize to even win to me. But yeah, like there's been instances of that, and those are probably like the main things that come to mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do see that. I don't get that as much because I'm very vocal about, my IBS isn't as severe as a lot of people's. And I'm aware of that. And as a health professional, I'm not coming in as, well, I have IBS, so I'm going to tell you everything that I do. Like I'm coming in from, I have IBS, so I've experienced, some of what you've experienced. And, I can relate on some level. I also have this experience in training where, I want to treat you. Like, I don't want to come in as just like, a coach of my own, experience, because that isn't valid either. So that's also something to remember is like, when we're looking at health professionals and coaching and all of that, like you have to be careful because every person's experience is different and what each person will react to and respond to is so different. So just following people to see what all is Christine doing? I'm going to do everything like that. And if it doesn't work for me, then, it must never work, or, that kind of thinking doesn't work. But I do see a lot of competition over like, how restrictive diets can be, or like I can, I'm going to eliminate all of these things, or, that kind of stuff. And there is a weird competition that happens. And I've seen how it impacts even like my clients of, well, they like this person is told me I should eliminate all of these things. And it's just like, I think there's this idea of I'm trying to be helpful, but I'm actually doing harm in my health because I'm telling people to do something that I'm doing because it feels like I've, figured it out. And there's like a little superiority there. It is a very fine line, but yeah, I have seen that. And it's like, it's not that it's degrading every time. Those types of comments where it's like, well, I'm worse than you. So there's almost that feeling of like, you're invalid, which you should never do to anybody. But then also you should do this and this and this and this and this, like kind of the unsolicited advice or the competition of, well, I am doing, no carbohydrates versus low FODMAP, or, it's like that kind of competition doesn't actually support because it's not empowering. It feels almost like you have to join in the competition. So yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, no, that's actually really interesting because that's definitely a part of it too. I definitely have seen either in my own DMs or even like in my comments or just on other people's posts of people. Again, like I feel like everyone, like their intentions are good. And I think everyone gets very passionate in our community, especially when they find something that works for them, because they're like, this one thing or these few things, like they helped me and I want it to help you. And then if you're like, well, I already tried that and it didn't work for me, sometimes people can be like, well, then you didn't do it right. And it's like, yeah, well, no, that's not true. Exactly. So yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I've definitely too.
Did you know that your gut and your brain are connected? With IBS, there can be a miscommunication between the gut and the brain, which is why stress can be such a big trigger for symptoms. Nerva helps you self-manage your IBS symptoms through science-backed gut-directed hypnotherapy via a handy app that provides a structured 6-week program followed by a maintenance plan. This can help you calm your gut and your mind for IBS symptom management. Use the link in show notes to try Nerva today for 30% off. Yeah. And you brought up something too, that's a kind of another little, it's almost like a sneaky, non-supportive thing that people do. And it is placing blame on the person who is dealing with the condition. And I think we see this in mental health. We see this in physical health, where there's this idea that because there are strategies that might work, and I see this from health professionals, it's something I try not to do myself and trying to be really cautious of, but because there's the low FODMAP diet, because there are medications, because there are stress management practices, it's like, well, if you don't do everything perfect according to these things, like, then it's your fault. Like, that's what people are saying is that, well, if you eat your trigger, and you talk about this a lot, but it's like, well, if you go eat the thing that causes your symptoms, like, it's all your fault. And sometimes that comes across in some of a well-meaning way. I think people are trying to say, like, well, you know what you should do. And if you do it, like, you'll feel better, which might be true. But then there's also the backhand of it that basically says, well, your condition is your fault. And if you're not managing it, like, that's on you. And like, that's just not a good thing, because we know with IBS, like, that's not true. There are layers and pieces. There are some that are in your control, but it's also not your fault that your gut can't handle those things. And there's also things that are completely out of your control that can impact you that wouldn't normally impact you. And hearing that just makes it feel like, oh, well, I'm never doing enough. And so there's no, like, why should I bring it up? Why should I talk about it? Why should anyone care about me? Like, there's a spiral. And do you experience that pretty often?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm like sitting here laughing because it's funny. Cause yeah, I literally, I did this yesterday or like 2 days ago. Like, I had a day where I ate everything I shouldn't have. And then I literally came on Instagram and I'm like, hey guys, I ate everything I wasn't supposed to, and I have a stomach ache. And I feel like I can't even sit here and complain about it. And like, I still had people messaging me like, you can totally complain about that. But like, yeah, I definitely get in my own head about that. And like, it's even funnier. I don't know if this is a little off topic, but like, I get asked a lot of, like, can you post what you eat in a day? And I avoid that like the plague. I'm like not a good role model of what to eat or what not to eat. But like, also, I've just become so scared of posting what I do eat, because I've gotten a lot of like criticism for like, people be like, well, no wonder you feel like crap. Like, you ate that yesterday. And it's just, it has made me like spiral in my own mind of like, okay, I'm doing this to myself. Like, my condition is like my fault because I'm just doing it to myself. Like you said, I'm not managing it well. So yeah, that definitely happens. And I definitely showcase it to the world too, that I do that.
Yeah, which I think it's okay. Like, you can do that for yourself. I think it's who has permission to like say that, right? And I say things. It's like, if you don't go sit on the toilet and you're constipated and you're wondering why you're so constipated, but you refuse to go sit on the toilet, it's like, there are those comments, and that's that line I mentioned of like, oh, I don't ever want to like make someone feel like it's their fault, and that's really hard. But like, sending someone a message or even telling your friend, like, hey, are you sure you're like, why are you eating that? It's like, you're literally saying that they don't deserve, because of IBS, like because of their mental health condition, because of whatever the disability, because of whatever is in their life, that they don't deserve to experience parts of life because that thing has to hold them back. And I think that that's something you don't realize that you may be saying to someone, and they can, like, you can say that, like, I can say, hey, onions give me make me bloated and give me gas, like, which is true. Onions trigger my symptoms. And most of the time I avoid onions. Sometimes I eat onions because they taste really good. Or sometimes, I order some meals that have onions in them and it's available and it's what I have. and I'm making the choice to eat the onions and I'm bloated because of it. And I know that I'm bloated because of it. I also deserved to have that choice to eat that convenient thing or have that flavor that I wanted and got to choose. And if I didn't allow or give you permission to come in and tell me, like, hey, if you stopped doing that, you'd feel better, it's like that doesn't come across well. And I think there's a difference between accountability from people that you have invited in, like maybe Jay, if let's say you decided, like, okay, we're going to travel and I really want to feel good. And so, hey, like, I know that I probably only need to drink one alcoholic drink a night or whatever it may be. It's a very small
Right.
thing. And so then you ask him, like, hey, can you help hold me accountable to this? Because this is really important and this is the reason why I want to do it. If he came in to say, well, okay, Christine, you've had one drink, like, it's probably enough. Like, remember, this is your goal. You invited him in to say that, so that's okay. Where it's not supportive is if someone came in to say, like, Christine, like, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol because you're going to feel bad. It's like, well, I didn't ask you to tell me that. Like, and again, that is such a fine line that I think it's always well-meaning, but at the same time, it's not supportive. And it's something that, as someone who's, living with IBS, like, it's something that you can also see and bring out and say of, like, hey, I appreciate you, like, wanting to help me feel better. I also didn't ask for that. And I deserve to get to make some choices. And, it's not my fault that I have IBS and that maybe my body responds differently when I make that choice. But, that's a boundary. So I don't know.
I think there's like a whole underlying theme to that of just like unsolicited comments or advice, not just from even people like in our community, but like just from everyone. I think that's something we all experience when we have these issues. It's like anytime you go anywhere, everyone in your family is trying to give you advice. Everyone, like your friends are trying to give you advice, your significant other is trying to give you advice. And I know that there have been times where most of the time I put on a smile and I'm like, yeah, like whatever, just like let them tell it to me. And then there are other times it really pisses me off. And I'm like, like sometimes it's like, I don't want to say it's stupid, but like they think they're giving me groundbreaking advice. And I'm like, yeah, I went to the doctor. Like I did go to, like, yeah, thank you for suggesting I go to the doctor. Like it's, I think people just need to be, and actually that's something that Jay and I have had to work on, because from his point of view too, it's really hard for him every day to hear me complain about being in pain and to watch me be in pain. I get that. On his side, he feels really helpless and he wants to help. But we've had to have a conversation of like, there are times I will ask for his advice on things like, what do you think if I did this or if I did this treatment or something? That's when there's a conversation for him to be like, yes or no. But there's also times where I've told him, I'm about to complain and I just want you to sit there and listen and tell me that sucks. Like, I don't want any further like advice or suggestions. I'm like not in that headspace. So yeah, you kind of have to have that conversation with people too, of just being like, hey, I'm not looking for advice. I just want to vent about this real quick. Yeah, that's really good. And, putting yourself in their shoes, most of the time, people who do that do mean well, right? They love you. And again, I get into this because I know some things. And so it's like, I want to ask those questions of like, oh, well, if you're hurting, like, is this going on? Is this going on? And you have to sometimes step back of like, I care. And that's why I'm saying it. But at the same time, if the person that I'm caring about, like, it's like love languages, right? Like if they're not asking to be cared for in that way, then it's actually doing harm. And so truly caring is asking like, hey, how can I support you? How can I care about you? Or I want to see you get better, and I want to help. What would that look like? Like, are you okay with that? Like, do you want me to help? Do you want my advice? Do you want my opinions? And if someone doesn't, being supportive in some situations, maybe even if you do know, if you maybe see the one thing they're doing that would change, like if they don't want to hear it, then the best thing that you can do to support is do what they need, take the step back, listen. And then, you never know, maybe that would open up again because you've developed that trust that you can share something with them. And I think on social media, it's so difficult because I think people
they do want to help, but also just want to share and like, want to interject and make comments without thinking about it because you don't have that person to person interaction. And so that can be kind of tricky. So it's just always thinking about, how would I feel if I heard that? And I've learned a lot of this, again, because like my IBS, it wasn't as severe. And I mean, I had a doctor recently who I do respect as a doctor tell me like, oh, are you sure that you had IBS? Which was so invalidating, where it was like, I mean, my life looks different now. It's like I am literally a dietitian that works to help people with IBS. It's like I, kind of manage it. Like it doesn't look the same as it did. But it's like, well, you're invalidating all of the, like those years and years of like pain and memories lost and, all the things that I went through as a child because it was so long ago. But, as an adult, like my life does look different now than a lot of people that I work with and a lot of people that I kind of interact with. And it can be, I think, easy to also brush over their experience because what I deal with isn't as severe. And I know I might be kind of going on a little bit of a rabbit trail with my mind, but it's like I fall into this. And I think it's something that we can think about as supporters, even in the community of just because maybe I haven't experienced the intense nausea, right, that someone might experience, or just because I don't have anxiety traveling, doesn't mean that the person next to me doesn't have anxiety traveling, or it doesn't mean that I know what they're going through just because I've experienced parts of it. Like, being curious, I think, is a way of being supportive. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like that idea of like only seeing things through your own lens, and that can actually harm in a way.
Absolutely. No, yeah, I've seen that a lot. And I even went live like kind of recently, and I kind of saw that happening in the comments. And the one thing I just always like say is like, it's important to remember with IBS and like honestly all like kind of gut issues is like there's no like one cure fits all for all of us. Like everyone, like we've said a million times, like everyone's so different, and what helps me might not help you. And that doesn't mean, again, that you did it wrong or like you're stupid or like
yeah,
whatever. But yeah, I've seen that, and it's just like you said, it's important to keep in mind that just because what works for me doesn't work for them, like it doesn't mean you get to invalidate that person's like what they're going through, what they're feeling, like their symptoms or anything. It's just we're all different, and we're all going to respond to different things. And so yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah. And part of that is knowing to what you need. So we kind of talked about like some things may not feel supportive. It might feel supportive. That can change day to day. And sometimes we don't know that until you get the comment, right? It's like, you don't realize that like, oh, unsolicited advice is not helpful for me until you get the person that's sliding in, telling you what to do. So how did you learn how to kind of learn yourself, figure out what you need, and then be able to have those conversations? Because you're marrying Jay. So you guys had some of those rocky moments. That's a good example of like, you have good friends that I'm sure you had not so great interactions with at, certain times, that you've been able to save those relationships and move them forward and figure out, how to communicate that. So I'd love for you to speak on that, of how you began to learn that and how you handled when you began to figure out that, okay, these certain things really are not helping me, without just getting mad. Or what do you do after you get mad?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I feel like it's been just a long time of learning about those things. And honestly, I probably feel like I haven't even gotten like a good handle on that until like I started my IBS life. I mean, to be honest, I feel like for years, I really just avoided people that made me feel like crap about what I was going through. Like if people were invalidating me or making me feel like horrible, like I would just kind of silently cut them off as friends or whatever. I just didn't surround myself in that.
Which is okay to do.
Absolutely. And I kind of encourage that if you do have people in your life that are like that, like you don't have to make it a big dramatic thing. Just like kind of ghost them a little bit until they're out of your life. I will say probably one of the harder people that has taken a while to have like proper support and communication from is my dad. And this is something I haven't even really talked about because I feel guilty for talking about my dad, but I think we've gotten to a place that we're like pretty good now. But there was a long time where like my dad is someone where like, even if he's sick, like he's just like a go-getter, like he doesn't care, nothing stops him. So when he had a child that had these gut issues that kept her from going to school and going to sports and like doing all these things, like it was just, I'm lazy. You're lazy. You're being lazy. And that has affected me until today. Like if anyone calls me lazy, it like really triggers me. But I learned early on that I didn't like that. And I would honestly just like stop talking to my dad. I'd stop telling him I felt sick. I'd stop telling him I didn't go to school that day. And it wasn't until I think I like matured that I was able to have like harder conversations with him and just be able to more explain like what IBS and how it affects me and how I'm not lazy. It's just like on days I can't do certain things, whatever. And then I would say, honestly, it wasn't until my IBS life when I started getting an influx of like unsolicited comments and advice that I really started to learn of what really made me mad. And I hope I've never blown up on anyone. I usually just try to like give that person the benefit of the doubt. Like, and I'll even message them back and be like, hey, I'm sure you had really good intentions with this message, but you need to be more careful if you're sending these messages to other people who might take it a different way or might really get affected by this. Or sometimes I'll just ignore it. But yeah, I feel like have really learned from having my IBS life, like what really bothers me, and just to like ignore it or just like kind of not deal with those people because they're not worth stressing over and feeling horrible over. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you brought up the family piece, because that is something that people experience. And, you know, especially our generation, there's generational things where, you know, generational mindsets. And I think that's changing as like our generation's raising human beings, you know. I think there's probably some other not so great things that are weaved in there, but the conversations around illness and even mental health. And I think IBS is not a mental health condition, right? It's not just a psychosocial condition that some people may claim it is. Like that's 10 years ago thinking. That's not what we know today. We know the very real like causes. We know some things that are actually going on in the gut. We don't have a cure, but we know at least some things that are happening. And so we know that it's not just a mental health piece. But I do think there is an overlap between digestive like disorders anyways, where there's not this clear, easy diagnosis or treatment, and mental health conditions, because it's a daily thing you have to live with. And it's not something everyone's just going to see on the outside. And what they see may not be what's truly going on. Like what they may see is laziness. What they may see is, oh, you're not trying. What they may see is like, oh, you're kind of like quiet or, you know, standoffish. It's like, but that's not really the case. Or you're flaky, right? You see that with a lot of IBS. You're always late. You're flaky. You don't show up, or you just leave. And it's, people can't understand what they haven't walked through. And I think the generation above us never addressed that and didn't know how to handle that and nourish or nurture that very well, which led to a lot of bad experiences with family members. And it can be so hard, even when they've lived with you and seen it over and over again, to bring that up. And I experienced that as a kid. I remember early elementary school, like I haven't really talked about this as much because it's still a memory I'm like digging into, because there's some of that memory that I don't fully remember with my childhood, but I would like poop my pants. And it had something, I think, with like my muscle, like pelvic floor muscles, like where I'd be overly constipated. Now that I know things, I'm trying to like figure out what was going on. But that led to some of my diagnosis, because it was, you know, that would happen. Then I'd also be in like really intense pain from not going to the bathroom. And, you know, so then I was going in and out of all these tests. And I remember I would get punished. Like I would get in trouble for like pooping my pants at school, you know. And looking back, it's like my family is incredible. My dad actually had chronic illness. And that was something we never talked about. And I think that was a big issue of it too, is like that kind of hidden stigma. And I take that into a lot of like my empathy now with clients, is like seeing how my dad lived with he lived with HIV/AIDS. So it's like very like not talked about, and had cancers, had a colostomy bag at one point. It's like we dealt with all of that. But here I am, this young kid, dad's dealing with this, probably sparked a lot of it. I'm pooping my pants at school, not mean, like I don't mean to, like I never intended to. And then I get in trouble for it and I almost get like punished. And then I also feel embarrassed. And, that led me to having this like extreme fear of like public restrooms and, all these things that could have been undone. And even though my mom is like a phenomenal person, like I have so much respect for her. And now she's so compassionate. Like there were moments where I kind of resented that and felt like, I wasn't cared about or loved. And, that had such an impact on my mental health as this young child. And, I now wish it's like, I wish that like the doctors I was seeing, like, I wish I had mental health, like help, like to be able to talk about that. And, that support, or I wish my doctor would have like stood up for me too, of like, this is why this is happening. And once we finally figured it out, like it did get better. Like my mom thankfully did listen and understand like, okay, something's wrong. But there was also this like misconception that I had control over it and I never did. And that takes a lot to undo. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I think if someone, I hear it all the time, like clients, like they have straining relationships with their family members and like, some don't want to ever bring it up or they try and they get shut down. It's like, do I continue trying with this family member or not? And I think there's grace because people don't understand what they haven't been through, but also like you do kind of have to talk about it. Which is where therapy helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Those conversations are really hard. And especially when it is family, like you said, it causes a lot of friction and it's friction you don't want to cause, but they're also the people you're around the most. And so you want them to understand you and support you the most. So it's really difficult. And it honestly, like we both just said, I think it just takes time sometimes to build that foundation for like better understanding for each other.
Yeah. And people can't go undo what they did too. I think it's something that's hard to remember. And I see that a lot, even in our community too, of like, yes, you need to set boundaries and like 100%. If someone's not supporting you, there may be a period of life that even a family member is like held to a distance, and like your mental health, that matters more than anything else. And so if you need that space, like it is okay to take that space. I personally don't think it's okay to fully isolate yourself. I think you need to find community because if you push everyone aside, you are alone. And we can't do life alone. Like it's not possible. We also can't do life with crappy people. So it's like, finding that support, and that's hard, of finding who those friends are and all of that. But it's also good to remember as you are healing from that and maybe working through that. And that's where I love mental health professionals of like, it's not your fault that you went through that with a family member. Like that doesn't mean that you are broken or that something's wrong with you, and getting support doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It means you went through something that is tough to work through and figure out. And like having someone help you do that is so valuable. But part of that is realizing that, your dad can't go undo everything he did. You can have conversations that can help him see your side of it. And like, there might be an apology or not. My mom, like I never got there, as I didn't need it at the end of the day when I began to actually see her perspective and, put myself in her shoes. And, I didn't need that reconciliation, but some people do need that, and that's possible, but you're not going to be able to undo everything that people have done. And so that's where I think taking care of yourself is important too. Recognizing that it's not your fault that was put on you. And it's also not your fault that like you need support. But then it's also important to get the support, which is that kind of fine line that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's even when I was thinking about this topic, when you think about support, you obviously like automatically think about like outside support. But one thing I've really been learning is like the self-support that I totally lack in myself, and how important that is when you are like living with these conditions. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, I hope you all have outside support, whether it's like your mom, your, significant other, your friends. But at the end of the day, you are truly the only one that like has your back, knows what you're feeling, knows what you need. And like, you need to like, as cliche, like you do need to love yourself and like hear yourself and understand yourself to like really like make it through this and find the proper outside support as well. So
absolutely. Yeah. I like to always to talk about it as like being on your body's team of like, you're either against your body or with your body. And when everyone has been against you or, experiences have disconnected you from yourself, which happens with IBS for sure. Cause it's like the things that should be happening without problem aren't happening. Tests are normal. It's like, there's literally all these signals from the world that like things should be fine, but they're really not fine. You separate where it's like, well, it's me against my gut. Right. And, we can make all the jokes about it, but at the same time, it's like, well, at the end of the day, like your gut is part of you. And so if you're against yourself, like you're never supported. Right. And like being on your same team, like it doesn't mean that you love your body. It doesn't mean that you are happy with the gut that you have. Like, it doesn't mean that your gut is like your best friend in the whole world and things are fine and rosy. It may mean that there's a lot of tension, but there's such a difference in like fighting against yourself versus tuning in of like, okay, something's going on. Like, I get it. Like, I hear you, but like, what is happening? And like really getting on the same team. It's something we teach in our programs. And it's big for me too, of like, how do I get in? And I think that also then sparks you're able to advocate. You're like, nope, no. I'm in my body. Like, you can't fight me because like I'm on the same team as myself. And like, you might be right. Yeah, my gut's a mess, but like, you can't say that about me because this is my gut. It's like, there's such a difference in that mind shift. And then, that is really important. So it's good that you brought that up.
Yeah. And because I went through Master Method when it like pretty much first came out and everything. And that's actually when I found out how disconnected I am from my own body, because I really like learned that I view my stomach as an outside enemy. Like, I feel like it's like someone that stands next to me and just like is giving me the finger all day. Like, that's how I truly have felt about my stomach. And I've had to like slowly relearn that like, no, this is me. Like, as much as I don't like it, like I do have to like put effort into like any other relationship, like into like myself and like trying to make those connections. So,
Yeah, it's so important and not easy. And not easy at all. It's not meant to be easy. And that's where I say like getting that support can be helpful. Like, not the support of, go love yourself. Like, if you get that support and no mental health professional is the same, no friend is the same, it's like, you have to be careful of what people are saying because that can actually worsen that. But if there is like a huge disconnect, like finding support for people that help people with chronic illness and, conditions, and to really talk through that and work through that of like, how do you listen to the body that you feel like has tortured you, or how do you connect to yourself when that's a coping mechanism, right? Like, it's a part of trying to feel secure and protected, and like you're safeguarding your mind and your anxiety by disconnecting from what you're feeling. And that can lead to issues like you're protecting yourself against listening to hunger and fullness, because if you eat, like, that you're going to have symptoms. So it's like, there are some very real things that come out of that, and it's not easy. And something that our members have to think about a lot is if that feels impossible, that they need support and they need grace of like moving slow, because it doesn't have to happen overnight, and you're not going to get there overnight. And it's easier for some than it is to others. So you also can't compare of where, Christina is or where I am, with how I connect to my body, because it's just not the same for everybody, because we all have different pasts and experiences. And being on the same team as a gut that is screaming at you every day, and like, it is very hard to do.
Yes, absolutely. It really is.
And sometimes it looks like yelling at each other. It's like, that's relationships. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights. And I know this is like a conversation that can go on forever in our community. And so if anyone listening, if you want to connect, like Christine's community is phenomenal at my IBS life, and be thoughtful of what you message, like the takeaway. But also don't be afraid to share what you're going through, because you never know like what community you can build. And, our communities are here to help with different perspectives. Like, there's humor, there's science, and there's a lot of sides to it, which is perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. And everyone out there that's listening, you deserve the proper support from everyone around you. And like we said, if there are people in your life that aren't giving that to you, you deserve to get rid of those people too. So yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Erin.